Death has always been one of the fundamental conditions that define human existence. Every person who has ever lived has shared the same limitation. No matter where they were born, what they believed, or how much power they possessed, the time they were given was finite. That is why death has shaped almost every part of human life. It influences the choices we make. And now, for the first time in human history, that condition is beginning to look less absolute than it once did. Around 1900, global life expectancy was about 32 years. By the beginning of the 21st century, it had more than doubled in many ways. This was the result of medicine and public health pushing back against forces that once caused people to die much earlier. Vaccines weakened diseases that once took children's lives. Antibiotics changed the meaning of infection. Surgery, anesthesia, blood transfusion, intensive care, and safer childbirth made survival more likely than it had been before. Modern medicine can transplant failing organs, rebuild damaged blood and immune systems through hematopoietic stem cell transplantation, and in some cancers, remove a patient's own immune cells, modify them, and return them to the body as treatment. Gene therapy can also supplement missing biological instructions in certain inherited disorders. Modern medicine has turned injuries and diseases that once ended lives into conditions the body may survive. In doing so, it has dramatically expanded humanity's capacity to stay alive. Advances in genetics, regenerative medicine, and biotechnology are beginning to challenge assumptions humanity has accepted for thousands of years. They do not prove that human immortality is already possible, but they are beginning to target aging itself. A future in which healthy lifespan is discussed not only in decades, but in centuries, is no longer only a dream from religion or legend. At first glance, such a future appears to be the fulfillment of one of humanity's oldest desires. It would give us more time to experience life beyond the limits that have always defined us. More time to learn, create, and love. Would seem to make life richer. But if humanity could live forever, what would happen to us? For most of human history, aging was understood as part of life. People accepted that the body weakened with time. It was treated as a fact built into existence itself. Yet while humanity accepted death, it was never truly satisfied with it. Ancient legends, myths, and religions have repeatedly returned to the themes of immortality and death. In a sense, the desire for immortality may be one of humanity's oldest ambitions. Many diseases that once tormented humankind have become treatable, yet aging itself remains. No matter how far civilization advanced, the human body continued to follow the same biological process, at least until now. Today, researchers are beginning to view aging from a very different perspective. For a long time, aging was treated as an unavoidable part of life. Now, some scientists study it as a biological process that may one day be changed. Around the world, research institutions are studying treatments that remove senescent cells, damaged cells that lose their normal function and accumulate in the body. Other researchers are exploring stem cell therapy, gene therapy, and regenerative medicine as ways to repair damaged organs and restore lost function. In animal experiments, partial cellular reprogramming has also suggested the possibility of reversing some age-related changes. These technologies are being studied with the aim of slowing, stopping, or even reversing certain aspects of aging itself. Of course, none of these have completely overcome aging. But what matters is that this discussion no longer belongs only to mythology or fantasy. It is beginning to be treated as a real problem in research institutions, biotechnology companies, and medical laboratories. The question may be moving closer to whether aging itself can one day become a treatable condition. If that becomes possible, humanity will face a future that previous generations could only imagine. A single career could last for centuries. Knowledge could accumulate on a scale never before possible. One person might directly witness historical changes that today would take many generations to see. But when a limitation disappears, we begin to realize how deeply that limitation shaped the world. If aging were eliminated, the first changes would be personal. People would remain healthy for far longer than they do today. Human relationships might last for hundreds of years. A career would no longer be measured in decades. A single person could master several professions across an extraordinarily long lifetime. For individuals, this may sound almost entirely beneficial, but the consequences would extend far beyond personal lives. Human society has always been built around a simple reality. People eventually leave. Every institution, whether a family, a company, or a nation, makes room for those who come next. Ideas change because generations change. Power changes hands because no one holds it forever. Even culture evolves through a continuous process of renewal. But what happens when that process slows dramatically? A political leader who remains active for 200 years might possess an unmatched understanding of history, diplomacy, and governance. Yet entire generations of younger leaders could spend their lives waiting for an opportunity that never arrives. Political systems could become more experienced while also becoming less responsive to new perspectives. The same problem could appear in business. Innovation often comes from people willing to challenge established assumptions. A society dominated by the same decision-makers for centuries may find change increasingly difficult. Human history has been shaped by repeated revolutions, and each new generation has questioned values that previous generations considered permanent. Without that continual renewal, societies may become more stable. But stability and adaptability are not always the same thing. The effects would extend into economics as well. For thousands of years, inheritance has been built upon the assumption that people eventually die. Wealth and businesses pass from person to person, and resources circulate through society. But in a world where people live for centuries, that circulation could slow dramatically. Younger generations might find themselves competing not only with their peers, but with individuals who have already accumulated centuries of experience, influence, and resources. None of these outcomes would necessarily lead to collapse. In some respects, society might become more knowledgeable, more efficient, and more capable of long-term planning than ever before. Yet something fundamental would be different. For most of history, death has quietly performed a role that few people think about. It has created space for new ideas, new generations, and new futures. And as humanity begins to imagine a world without aging, we may realize that mortality has been one of the mechanisms through which civilization renews itself. When people think about immortality, they often focus on what would be gained. They often imagine additional years, new experiences, and opportunities that ordinary human life could never contain. Far less attention is given to a different question. What happens to the human mind when life stops having a visible horizon? For most of us, time feels valuable because it is limited. We understand what it means to lose people we love and to lose relationships that once shaped our lives. But if a life lasted 300 years, or 500, or even 1,000, our relationship with time would almost certainly begin to change. The unit of a life would become much larger. Entire historical eras could pass within a single lifetime. The future would no longer feel distant. It would simply feel inevitable. Relationships might change as well. Today, people often speak about spending a lifetime together. But what does that promise mean when a lifetime lasts for centuries? Would marriages endure for 500 years? Would people remain committed to the same goals, the same identities, and the same relationships after centuries of personal change? There's another possibility that is rarely discussed. A world without aging would not necessarily be a world without death. Even if humans overcame aging as a natural process, accidents and disasters could still take away centuries of life in a single moment. And that may change the way we think about the value of a life. Today, the death of an 80-year-old person is often viewed differently from the death of a child. Part of that difference comes from the future that was lost. In a society where a healthy person might reasonably expect to live for 800 years, an accidental death could carry a very different weight, because the amount of life lost would become immeasurably larger. Even grief itself might change. Today, the death of a loved one often feels tragic because their time ended too soon. But in a world where people routinely live for hundreds of years, loss may be experienced differently after centuries together. Grief might no longer feel like the theft of a future. Perhaps it would feel more like the closing of an extraordinarily long chapter. Then another challenge appears: memory. The human brain evolved for a lifetime measured in decades. If hundreds of years of experience were layered onto that mind, could the accuracy of memory remain the same? And if memory begins to fade, what happens to identity? How much of your past can disappear before you become someone else? Could a human mind remain human across a life that long? Even if humanity succeeds in defeating aging, another question remains: who is the person that survives? If life lasts for centuries, or even longer, how much of your past self can you remember while still remaining yourself? Human values can change dramatically in 10 years, or even less, and despite those changes, we still consider ourselves the same person. Now extend that process across centuries. A person who lives for hundreds of years would repeatedly witness changes in history, in what society considers right, and in themselves. How many times would someone reinvent themselves across 500 years? How many different lives could exist within a single lifetime? And at what point would the person who began that journey no longer resemble the person who continues it? No human mind can perfectly preserve every experience indefinitely. If centuries of memories accumulate, older memories may continue to fade, and we may be forced to ask what remains of the original self. The problem is surprisingly similar to an ancient philosophical thought experiment known as the ship of Theseus. If every plank of a ship is gradually replaced, is it still the same ship? Human beings may eventually face a similar question. Perhaps identity has always been a process, a story continuously rewritten across time. If that is true, the question shifts from preserving a fixed self to continuing that process across centuries. And then the question becomes whether forever can fit inside the human experience at all. For most of human history, death has been treated as an enemy. It takes time away from us, separates families, and brings an end to knowledge, love, ambition, and possibility. That is why it is easy to understand humanity's desire to resist it. If medicine could remove disease, repair the body, and extend life indefinitely, refusing such a future would seem almost impossible. But death has given human life a shape. It has taught us that everything has a beginning and an end. Because life ends, humanity has had to make choices and find value in what exists now. If that changes, there will come a time when humanity has to create psychological, social, and personal endings for itself. Because human beings are shaped not only by what they continue, but also by what they let go, to live forever. The body has to be preserved, but the mind will require something far more delicate. An endless life can eventually become too heavy to carry and begin to corrode the mind. If every moment is held forever, the past becomes impossible to escape, and a person could suffer from the same pain for hundreds of years. At the same time, every life contains many precious moments that no one wants to forget. The question is not only how to live longer or how to keep the body healthy, but what a person must preserve in order to remain themselves. For humans to live indefinitely, we may need to understand the limits of memory and reshape memory itself, almost as if it were data. Perhaps death has been the final editor of human life. If that final page disappears, will humanity truly gain the future it has always wanted?